My sister banged on my window at midnight, screaming, "Let me in before they see me." I told her to use the front door. The banging on my second-floor bedroom window jolted me awake at 12:23 a.m. on a Friday night in October. Not gentle tapping, violent, desperate pounding that rattled the glass in its frame. I rolled over, disoriented, and saw my sister Meredith's face pressed against the window, her mouth moving frantically, her fists hammering the glass. She was crying, her eyes wild with terror I'd never seen before. I fumbled for my phone on the nightstand, squinting at the brightness, trying to make sense of why my 20-year-old sister was outside my window instead of in her apartment across town. I cracked the window open about 3 inches, annoyed more than concerned because Meredith had a history of drama. She'd shown up drunk at family dinners, borrowed money she never repaid, dated men who made our parents nervous. This felt like another episode in a pattern I'd grown tired of managing. "What the hell, Mare? It's past midnight." "Let me in," she gasped, her voice breaking. "Please, Owen, you have to let me in right now. They're going to find me. They're coming. Please." Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold on to the window ledge. I could see scratches on her arms, dirt on her face, her clothes torn. But my first thought wasn't that she was in genuine danger. My first thought was that she'd gotten drunk, fought with her boyfriend Kyle, and needed a place to crash rather than face him. This had happened twice before in the past year. "Use the front door," I said, already closing the window. "I'm not climbing out there to pull you in. Go around to the front and I'll let you in." The look on her face changed then. Terror transformed into something worse. Betrayal mixed with resignation, like I'd just condemned her to something she couldn't escape. "Owen, please," she whispered, her voice barely audible through the glass. "There's no time. They're watching the front. Please, just—" But I'd already closed the window completely and pulled the curtain shut, irritated with her dramatics. I heard her crying outside, heard her fists hit the window a few more times with decreasing force, and then silence. I lay back down, my phone showing 12:26 a.m., and waited for her to come around to the front door. I'd let her in, let her sleep on the couch, and in the morning we'd have the same conversation we'd had before about getting her life together, about breaking up with Kyle, about maybe going back to school or getting into therapy. The familiar script of being the responsible older brother cleaning up his younger sister's messes. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. No knock at the front door, no sound of her footsteps on the porch. Just the quiet hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the distant sound of traffic on the highway a few blocks away. At 12:38 a.m., I got up and went downstairs to check if she was waiting outside. I opened the front door and looked out at the empty porch, the empty driveway, the street with its pools of yellow light from the street lamps. Meredith's beat-up Nissan was parked 3 houses down, but there was no sign of her anywhere. I called her phone. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I texted, "Where'd you go? I'm downstairs, door's unlocked." No response. I stood there for another 10 minutes in my t-shirt and boxers, the October night air cold enough to raise goosebumps on my arms, before finally going back inside and locking up. I've been living alone in this rental house for 2 years since my ex-girlfriend Qley had moved out, working as a software developer for a medical records company, spending most evenings gaming or watching shows. Quiet life, no drama, which was exactly how I liked it after growing up in a household where Meredith's various crises had dominated every family gathering since she was 15. She'd started running away from home at 16, getting into screaming fights with our parents about rules and curfews. She'd dropped out of college after 1 semester, bounced between retail jobs, moved in with Kyle 8 months ago, despite everyone telling her he was bad news. Our parents had mostly given up trying to control her, adopting a stance of she needs to learn from her own mistakes. I'd adopted the same philosophy, maintaining boundaries, not getting sucked into her chaos. So when she didn't show up at my door that night, I assumed she'd changed her mind, driven off somewhere else, maybe back to Kyle's apartment or to a friend's place. I went back to bed and fell asleep within 20 minutes, completely unaware that my sister was at that moment running through backyards 3 streets over, trying desperately to find somewhere safe while someone hunted her. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from my mother. The first one had come in at 6:15 a.m., the most recent at 8:04 a.m. There were also 3 voicemails and a string of texts that made my stomach drop even before I listened to the messages. Call me immediately. Have you heard from Meredith? Owen, this is serious. Call me now. I called her back at 8:11 a.m., and she picked up before the first ring finished. Where is she? My mother demanded, her voice sharp with fear and anger. Where's your sister? When did you last see her? I sat up in bed, my brain still foggy with sleep. What? I don't know. She came by last night around midnight, but then left. Why? What's going on? There was a pause, and I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. She came to your house? Last night? Oh, and what do you mean she came by and left? Did you see her? Did you talk to her? I explained about the window, about telling her to use the front door, about her not showing up and me assuming she'd driven off. With each detail, my mother's breathing got faster and more ragged. You didn't let her in? She came to you in the middle of the night, and you didn't let her in? Her voice broke on the last words. Mom, what's happening? Why are you… She cut me off. Kyle is dead. Someone killed him in his apartment last night. The police found him this morning when his landlord went to check because there was blood seeping under the door. They're looking for Meredith as a witness, possibly as a suspect. And you're telling me she came to you at midnight covered in dirt, and you just sent her away? The room tilted. I sat there holding my phone, trying to process what she'd just said. Kyle is dead. Meredith was there. She'd come to me terrified, begging to be let in, saying they were coming. Not him. Them. Plural. Owen, are you listening to me? The police are going to want to talk to you. I'm giving them your address right now. Don't leave the house. She hung up before I could respond. I sat on my bed in my boxers and t-shirt, staring at my phone, replaying the scene from 12 hours ago. Meredith's face at the window, terror in her eyes, scratches on her arms, dirt on her clothes. They're watching the front. Not paranoia, not drama. A real warning I'd dismissed as another one of her episodes. The police arrived at 9:27 a.m. 2 officers in a marked patrol car, followed 15 minutes later by an unmarked sedan carrying a detective. Detective Lawrence Pruitt was in his 50s, black, with gray at his temples, and the kind of measured calm that comes from decades of seeing terrible things. He showed me his badge and asked if we could talk inside. I let them in, offered coffee they declined, and sat on my couch while Detective Pruitt asked me to walk him through everything that happened the previous night. I told him about Meredith at the window, about what she'd said, about me telling her to use the front door. His expression didn't change, but I saw him make a note in his small leather notebook. And you didn't let her in through the window? He asked, his voice neutral. Did she explain why she couldn't use the front door? I shook my head, feeling shame crawling up my neck. She said something about they were watching the front, but I thought she was being dramatic. She has a history of… I stopped, realizing how terrible this sounded. A history of what? Detective Pruitt prompted. Drama, relationship problems. I thought she'd had a fight with Kyle and was exaggerating. I didn't think she was actually in danger. Detective Pruitt nodded slowly. Kyle Brennan was found deceased in his apartment this morning at approximately 6:45 a.m. The medical examiner's preliminary assessment suggests he died between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. from multiple stab wounds. Your sister Meredith lived with him, and neighbors reported hearing a violent argument between them around 10:30 p.m. last night. Her car was found abandoned 3 blocks from your house around 7 a.m. with blood on the driver's seat and her purse still in the passenger seat. We need to find her, both as a witness to what happened and because she may be in danger herself if there were other people involved as she indicated to you. Blood on the driver's seat. My sister's blood. I felt my hands start shaking. What kind of blood? How much? Detective Pruitt's expression softened slightly. Enough to suggest injury, but not enough to suggest critical blood loss. The pattern suggested it came from her hands or arms, possibly defensive wounds. Mr. Brennan had skin under his fingernails that will be tested for DNA, and there were signs of a violent struggle in the apartment. We're trying to piece together what happened and where your sister went after leaving your house. I gave them my phone, showing the texts I'd sent Meredith that were still unread, the call logs showing my attempted contact, the exact times everything had happened. One of the uniformed officers photographed my bedroom window from outside, documenting where Meredith had been. Detective Pruitt asked if I had any idea where Meredith might go if she was scared, if she had friends or other family in the area. I gave him names of her two closest friends, Madison and Iris, and our parents' address. He took everything down methodically. "One more question," Detective Pruitt said as they were leaving. "When your sister said, 'They're coming,' and 'they're watching the front,' did she give any indication of who they were? Did she mention names or describe these people?" I replayed her words in my head, trying to remember exact phrasing through my own dismissiveness. No, she just said "they" multiple times. She seemed terrified of whoever they were. After the police left, I sat on my couch and called my mother back. She'd calmed down slightly but was still furious with me. "If something happens to her, Owen, if she's hurt or worse because you didn't help her." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The implication hung between us like a blade. I spent the rest of that Saturday trying to find Meredith. I drove to every place I could think of, her friends' apartments, the coffee shop where she'd worked before getting fired 3 months ago, the park where we'd played as kids. Nothing. Her phone went straight to voicemail now, suggesting it was either dead or turned off. Madison and Iris both told me they hadn't heard from her in days. I checked her social media, which hadn't been updated since Thursday night when she'd posted a picture of a sunset with the caption, "Sometimes endings are really beginnings." The comments were full of people asking if she was okay, where she was, had she heard about Kyle. By evening, the news had picked up the story. "Local man found murdered, girlfriend missing," was the headline on the regional news website. They used a photo of Kyle from his Facebook page, smiling in a baseball cap, and a photo of Meredith from 2 years ago when she still had blonde hair instead of the dark brown she'd dyed it recently. The article painted her as the primary suspect, citing the neighbor's report of hearing them argue and the fact that she'd fled the scene. No mention of the blood in her car or the possibility she was a victim too. Sunday morning, Detective Pruitt called me. "We found surveillance footage from a gas station 2 blocks from your house. It shows your sister at 12:52 a.m. Friday night. She's clearly injured, bleeding from cuts on her hands and face. She used the payphone there to make a call, but we haven't been able to determine who she called because it went to a number that's no longer in service. After that, she walked away from the gas station heading east. That's where we lose her trail." He paused. "I'm sharing this because I want you to understand that your sister is likely in serious danger. Whether she's running from the police or from whoever else was involved in Kyle Brennan's death, she needs to come in voluntarily before something worse happens. If you hear from her, you need to convince her to turn herself in, for her own safety." I promised I would, but I had no idea how to reach her. She'd vanished completely. Monday came, and I tried to focus on work, but I couldn't concentrate on debugging code while my sister was missing and possibly bleeding somewhere. I took a personal day and spent it driving around the city, checking homeless camps, asking people if they'd seen a young woman with dark brown hair, 5'6", probably injured. Nobody had seen her. Or if they had, they weren't telling. On Wednesday, 5 days after Kyle's murder and Meredith's disappearance, I got a text from an unknown number at 2:47 a.m. "It's me. I'm okay. I'm sorry for everything. Tell Mom and Dad I love them. Don't try to find me." I called the number immediately, but it was already disconnected. I screenshot the message and sent it to Detective Pruitt, who called me back within 20 minutes despite the early hour. "We're tracing the number. It was likely a burner phone, but we might be able to triangulate her location based on tower pings. This is good, Mr. Foster. It means she's alive and able to communicate. That's the best news we've had all week." But it didn't feel like good news. It felt like a goodbye message, the kind of thing someone sends before they do something permanent. I called my mother and read her the text. She started crying. On Thursday, Detective Pruitt called with an update that changed everything. "We arrested someone in connection with Kyle Brennan's murder. A man named Dante Caruso, who has known ties to organized crime. He was picked up on an unrelated warrant, and during questioning admitted to being at Kyle's apartment the night of the murder. He's claiming Kyle owed money to some dangerous people and that your sister witnessed something she shouldn't have." I felt my chest tighten. What does that mean? Is Meredith in danger from these people? Detective Pruitt's voice was careful. "According to Caruso, Kyle had gotten involved in some gambling debts and had agreed to do some courier work to pay them off. Low-level drug running mostly. But he got stupid, started skimming product to sell on his own. When his bosses found out, they sent people to deliver a message. Your sister apparently walked in during that message delivery. Caruso claims she ran, and they let her go because killing her would bring too much heat. But he also says his bosses were worried she'd talk to the police, so they put word out to find her before she could. That's why she was running when she came to your house. She wasn't running from Kyle. She was running from the people who'd just killed him in front of her. The room felt too small suddenly. I couldn't get enough air. So, when she said, "They're coming," and "they're watching the front," she meant these criminals were actually hunting her. And I sent her away? Detective Pruitt didn't answer directly. We're working with Organized Crime Task Force now. Caruso is cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence. He's given us names of the other people involved. We've made 2 more arrests this morning, and we're confident we've neutralized the immediate threat to your sister. If she's still alive and hiding, she needs to know she can come in safely now. We can protect her. That afternoon, the story broke wider. Murder linked to drug trafficking ring was the new headline, and suddenly Meredith wasn't a suspect anymore. She was a witness who'd fled for her life. The narrative had completely flipped. News outlets were now running stories about a scared young woman on the run from dangerous criminals, using more recent photos of her and describing her as missing and endangered. My phone rang constantly with reporters wanting to know what I knew, wanting a statement from the family. I didn't answer any of them. What could I say? That my sister had begged me for help and I'd dismissed her because I was tired of her drama. That she might be dead in a ditch somewhere because I couldn't be bothered to climb out of bed and open a window? On Friday, exactly 1 week after Kyle's murder, my mother called. "The police found her," she said, her voice thick with relief and something else I couldn't identify. "She's alive. She's in a hospital in Virginia. She walked into an emergency room this morning and collapsed. She's dehydrated and malnourished and has an infection from untreated wounds, but she's alive." I drove to Virginia with my parents that afternoon, a 6-hour drive during which nobody spoke much. My mother cried quietly in the passenger seat, while my father drove with his jaw clenched. When we arrived at the hospital, Detective Pruitt was already there with a Virginia state investigator. They'd been taking Meredith's statement about what happened that night. She was in a private room with a police guard outside, both for her protection and because she was still technically a witness to a homicide. When I walked into her room, she looked so small in the hospital bed. She'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. Her face was pale and hollow, and both her arms were wrapped in bandages from the wrist to the elbow. She had stitches on her left cheek, and her hands were covered in cuts that were healing badly from lack of treatment. When she saw me, her face did something complicated, relief and anger and hurt all mixed together. "Hey," I said, my voice coming out rough. "Hey yourself," she said quietly. Our parents pushed past me, our mother sobbing and clutching Meredith's hand, our father standing awkwardly at the foot of the bed, like he didn't know what to do with his own emotions. After our parents left to get coffee, giving us some privacy, Meredith looked at me directly for the first time. "You didn't believe me," she said. It wasn't an accusation, just a flat statement of fact. I sat in the chair next to her bed, my hands clasped between my knees. "No, I didn't. I thought you were being dramatic. I thought it was another Kyle fight, and you needed a place to crash." I paused. "I'm sorry, Mer. I'm so fucking sorry." She was quiet for a long moment. "I knew you wouldn't believe me. That's why I was begging. Because I knew you'd think I was exaggerating, making it bigger than it was. I knew my history of being a mess would make you dismiss me. And I was right." The words landed like punches. "Tell me what happened that night," I said, "if you can, if you want to." Meredith looked at the ceiling, her eyes filling with tears. Kyle had been dealing drugs for these guys for about 3 months. I didn't know the full extent of it until that night. I thought he was just smoking weed with friends, but it was worse. He'd been running pills, powder, all of it, and he'd been stealing from them, selling their product and keeping the money. He thought he was smart enough to get away with it. She wiped her eyes with her unbandaged hand. That night, I came home from working a double shift at the restaurant around 10:30. Kyle was agitated, pacing on his phone. He told me I needed to leave, that some people were coming over and I should go to a friend's house. I asked why, and he told me to stop asking questions. We fought about it, and that's when the neighbors probably heard us arguing. Then, before I could leave, there was knocking at the door. Kyle went white. He told me to hide in the bedroom and not come out no matter what I heard. So I did. She took a shaky breath. I heard them come in. 4 men, maybe 5. I heard Kyle trying to explain, trying to say he'd pay it all back with interest. Then I heard the sounds of them beating him. He was screaming, and they were laughing about it, telling him this was what happened to thieves. I was in the bedroom with my phone trying to call 911, but one of them must have heard me or seen the light from my screen through the crack in the door. He kicked it open and found me there. The tears were streaming down her face now. He grabbed my phone and smashed it. Then he dragged me out into the living room where Kyle was on the floor bleeding. There was so much blood. The main guy, the one in charge, he looked at me and said, "You Kyle's girl?" And when I nodded, he said, "You see what happens to people who steal from us? You remember this. And if you talk to police, if you say one word about what you saw here tonight, we'll find you and we'll do worse." Then one of the other guys said, "Why don't we just handle her now? No witnesses." And the main guy thought about it. I watched him actually consider killing me right there. But then he said, "Nah, let her run. Let her spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. That's a better punishment." Meredith's hands were shaking now. They stabbed Kyle in front of me, multiple times. He was begging them to stop, and they just kept going. Then they turned to me and said, "Run. You've got a 5-minute head start before we come after you." So I ran. I grabbed nothing. No phone, no wallet, no keys. Just ran out of that apartment in the clothes I was wearing and kept running. I got to my car and drove toward your house because you were the closest person I could think of. I was covered in Kyle's blood from where they'd grabbed me and shoved me around. My hands were bleeding from broken glass I'd stepped on running barefoot out of the apartment. I was terrified they were following me. And when I got to your house and saw your light was off, I didn't want to use the front door because I was sure they'd followed me, that they were watching and waiting. So I parked down the street and came around through the neighbor's yard to your window. She looked at me with devastation in her eyes. "And you told me to use the front door. You wouldn't let me in. So I climbed down and tried the front. But when I got around to your porch, I saw a car I didn't recognize parked across the street with someone sitting in it, and I panicked. I thought it was them, so I ran again. I felt like I was going to be sick. I'm so sorry, I thought—" "I know what you thought," she interrupted. "You thought I was being dramatic, because that's what I do, right? I cause problems and make everything about me. Except this time it was real, and you didn't believe me, and I almost died because of it." The guilt was crushing. I couldn't breathe under the weight of it. "What happened after you left my house?" Meredith wiped her face. "I walked to that gas station and used the payphone to call Kyle's mom because I didn't know what else to do. But her number had been disconnected. Then I just started walking. I stole some clothes from a donation box outside a church. I found a homeless camp and stayed there for a few days, but some guys there got aggressive, so I kept moving. I was afraid to go to the police because those men had said they'd kill me if I talked. I was afraid to go to a hospital because they asked questions, so I just kept hiding and moving and trying to survive on nothing." She gestured to her bandaged arms. "These got infected. The cuts on my hands, the glass from the apartment. I tried to clean them with water from public bathrooms, but they just got worse. By Thursday, I was running a fever and couldn't think straight. Friday morning, I passed out on a sidewalk in Virginia and someone called 911. When I woke up in the ER, I told them everything because I was too weak to keep running." Over the next few days, Meredith gave formal statements to Detective Pruitt and the Organized Crime Task Force. Her testimony, combined with Dante Caruso's cooperation, led to the arrest of 7 more people involved in the drug trafficking ring and Kyle's murder. The man who'd given the order to kill Kyle was named Vincent Rossi, a mid-level enforcer with a long criminal history. He was charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and a dozen other counts. The evidence was overwhelming: Meredith's eyewitness testimony, Caruso's statement, forensics from the crime scene, and phone records showing communication between the various conspirators. Meredith was placed in a witness protection program until the trials, which wouldn't happen for months. She stayed with our parents after being released from the hospital, recovering both physically and psychologically. I visited every weekend, bringing groceries, helping around the house, trying to make up for a mistake I could never actually fix. Our relationship was strained. She didn't trust me anymore, and I didn't blame her. The trial started 8 months later. Vincent Rossi was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life without parole. 4 of his associates got sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years for their roles in Kyle's death and the subsequent intimidation of a witness. Dante Caruso, who'd cooperated from the beginning, got 12 years with possibility of parole in 6. Throughout the trials, Meredith had to testify repeatedly, reliving that night each time. I attended every day of proceedings, sitting in the gallery, watching my sister be torn apart by defense attorneys who tried to paint her as an unreliable witness with a history of drug use and dramatic behavior. She held firm, telling the truth with devastating consistency. After the final conviction, Meredith and I sat in our parents' backyard while she smoked a cigarette with shaking hands. "I need to tell you something," she said. "That night at your window, when you told me to use the front door, I knew in that moment that you didn't believe me, that you thought I was crying wolf again, and I understood why. I'd given you every reason to doubt me over the years. But that doesn't make it okay," I said. "You came to me terrified and bleeding, and I dismissed you." She nodded. "Yeah, but I also need to take responsibility for creating a pattern where people stopped taking me seriously. I'd made myself into the girl who cried wolf, and that night I paid the price for it. We both did." She stubbed out her cigarette. "I'm in therapy now, real therapy, 3 times a week, working on why I made so many destructive choices, why I chose guys like Kyle, why I sabotaged relationships with people who cared about me. I'm starting to understand that I was afraid of being boring, of being the good girl who did everything right. So I manufactured drama to feel alive, and it almost got me killed." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. She'd lost her boyfriend, witnessed a murder, been hunted by criminals, spent a week homeless and infected and terrified. And she'd survived. "I'm proud of you," I said. "For surviving, for testifying, for doing the hard work now." She gave me a small, sad smile. "Don't be proud yet. I've got years of work ahead of me, but at least I'm alive to do it." 3 years later, Meredith graduated from community college with a degree in social work. She wanted to help other young women who'd found themselves in dangerous relationships or situations like hers. She'd been sober for 30 months, attending meetings religiously, working with a sponsor who'd become a close friend. Our relationship had slowly rebuilt itself, though it would never be exactly what it was before. There was always a shadow between us. The night I didn't believe her, the night she almost died because of it. But we'd learned to talk about it openly rather than letting it fester. I'd spent 3 years in my own therapy, working through the guilt and shame, learning to forgive myself without forgetting what I'd done. My therapist, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, helped me understand that guilt could be either destructive or constructive, depending on what I did with it. I chose to let it make me a better person, a better brother, more aware of my own biases, more willing to believe people when they said they were in trouble. I think about that night constantly, about the sound of her fists on my window, about her desperate voice begging me to let her in, about the moment I pulled the curtain closed and condemned her to a week of hell that could easily have ended with her body in a ditch. I think about how my dismissiveness, my annoyance at being woken up, my exhaustion with her pattern of drama nearly cost my sister her life. And I think about how many other people are crying for help right now, and how many of us are dismissing them because we're tired, because we've heard it before, because we can't tell the difference between real wolves and false alarms until it's too late. Meredith says she's forgiven me. I'm still working on forgiving myself. But we're both alive, both healing, and that's more than we would have had if she hadn't survived that night. Sometimes she'll reference it in dark humor. "Remember when you left me to die? Good times." And I'll wince, and she'll laugh, and we'll move forward. Because that's what survival looks like. Not forgetting, but learning to live with what happened and choosing to build something better from the wreckage. The last time we talked about that night seriously was on the 5-year anniversary of Kyle's murder. We were having coffee at a diner, and Meredith said something that stuck with me ever since. You know what the worst part was? Not that you didn't believe me. It was that I understood why. I'd spent years training everyone to dismiss me, to see my emergencies as false alarms, so when a real emergency finally came, nobody could tell the difference. That's on me as much as it's on you. I started to argue, but she held up her hand. No, listen, I'm not absolving you. You made a choice that night and it was the wrong choice. But I created the context where that choice made sense to you. We both failed that night, and we've both had to live with the consequences. She was right. We'd both failed, and we'd both survived, and we'd both learned. If you made it this far, I need you to understand something. When someone comes to you desperate and afraid, even if they have a history of being dramatic, even if you're tired of their patterns, even if it's the middle of the night and you just want to go back to sleep, please listen to them. Because the one time you dismiss them might be the one time it's real. The one time they actually need you might be the one time you turn them away, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing you could have prevented what happened if you'd just opened the door. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.